Ray Erario. We got Ray joining us today. I really appreciate you coming in and hearing your story today and getting us caught up to speed on the NIL landscape. Thanks for joining me.
No, I appreciate you having me.
So take me back to, give me a little bit of your brief story. It's not like you're 40 years old over here, right? So it's not going to take a ton of time, but obviously you do have a unique story. From the Northeast, right? And you end up in the desert here. Tell me a little bit of brief background, get me caught up to speed in terms of where you got to today.
Awesome. Yeah, so originally from Long Island, New York, a small town called Manorville, where a lot of people probably don't know what that is, but lived there for about 18 years. Came out to Arizona, attended Arizona State University, got my sports business degree over there. Grew a great network, from Greek life and business council, stuff like that, and really just dove in. Came out here, didn't know anyone. Came out here, always wanted to go out here for some reason. I think it was more so just kind of test the waters. Living somewhere solo, nowhere to lean off of. Really just kind of see what you could make out of it, and met a bunch of people. Met some Arizona State football players like Daniel Ngata, Elijah Badger. Made a great connection with them my junior year, and then kind of throughout that year, following. Met my business partner, Ben Klauser, and his amazing family, Mike and Mark, and Dalton, who's our NFLP agent, and basically hit the ground running. So they gave us advice. They were 30-year-plus NFL agents, worked with Marcus Colston, David Tyree. So really just kind of, held us as like a, guided us through the journey in the beginning, which was, looking back, a small journey, but that first year was obviously essential. So just really built our network, and then, signed Daniel Ngata as his NIL manager when it first came out. More so just because he had that trusted relationship with me, which I'm actually going up to do his pro day this weekend at Washington. So
Very
full
cool.
circle, 3-4 years later, I'm excited for that. But really just kind of put our best foot forward. Build business relationships, athlete relationships, and then around our third or fourth client working together, we started Young Buck Sports Management, where we wanted to grow a full tier, service agency where we could cover all categories. Where me and my partner just act as the marketing agent, stuff like that, and boots on the ground kind of thing. So, yeah, really just graduated there. Never thought I would stay out here after 4 years. Loved Arizona State, just didn't know much outside of it. So it's funny, now 6 years later, still out in Arizona. Probably be here a few more years too. But yeah, I really end up in Scottsdale, and just really tackling the landscape.
I'm assuming you didn't go to Arizona State to set out to become an NIL, expert, so to speak. And I don't even think NIL was in existence probably when you got here. Maybe it was 2021, I believe, is when it started.
Yeah.
So, what did you initially intend to go to school for? And then, at what point were you like, "Wait a second, I can make this like a thing"?
Yeah, so it's funny. So it actually kind of pushed me in the direction where I had an internship with the Cardinals my freshman year, which was more so game day operations kind of thing. And it got cut short because of COVID. I was probably the first one let go, so I really didn't even get to show up for work. But was pumped to come out here for the summer and of my freshman year, and kind of get into the sports industry. And always had like a passion for sports. Grew up playing baseball. Just not the crazy skill set to go play, D1 or anything like that. So, knew that the cap was there. So always had a love for sports though. And it's funny, one of my, my coaches and teachers used to joke around how I was going to be an agent before I even, thought of it, just because I was such like a student of the game, so to say. And, but yeah, so came out here, and then really wasn't so set on like, because it was a business major as well. So it was
Okay.
kind of flexible. So
Yeah.
always wanted to be a businessman, entrepreneur. Wasn't so dying to get into sports, but always loved it, and really, just really naturally kind of, put me in that direction, meeting these guys, and they almost empowered me to kind of do it, as their agent and manager when it first came out, to just step into the field.
Sure. And obviously, after like 3 or 4 guys, you created this company, right? But what would you say was like the breakthrough moment, like in terms of this actually coming to fruition to where it's no longer something fun that you're doing on the side as a student, and it's like we can hire employees, and was it a particular person? Was it a particular connection? Was it the timing? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, I feel like it's a few different things. Like, at first, I would say like my big kind of, moment was when I signed Daniel, my first client, because, I've known him for years, but it probably took, a year just to sign him, right? So it was kind of helping him as his manager, being there as a trustworthy friend. But, obviously I wasn't, I didn't have the skill set, past tense to speak on. So,
Sure.
Once he really, I remember actually he was, I was at my friend's birthday dinner, so we were with his family and all that stuff, and he was ready to sign the contract, and I stepped out and got on the phone. He's like, I'm ready to ride, like, if you are. And I'm like, let's go. And I remember going back to the dinner and not saying anything all day because I didn't want to, like, steal, the thunder of my friend's 21st.
Very polite of you.
Yeah, so, but I was like, I know all my friends were, knew how much it meant to me, too, and I was waiting on that to, prove myself. So really then was the first time I was like, okay, now, I really felt that honor that I had to, like, give him every day and, as I worked for him. So I was doing 20 and a half credits, finishing off school too. So that was the push mark. Yeah, that was the push mark. And I even tell our interns now and stuff. It's like it was a way different world back then. Obviously, a whole new landscape, and it wasn't as crazy of a Wild West landscape it is now. With money getting thrown around left and right. So it was really just kind of being there as a support system and helping him through that journey and stuff. But I would say that, and then. Probably like recently too, our last internship cycle, we put out an summer internship and about 560 people applied.
Wow.
So that was kind of like a wow, like that amount of people want to come, see our vision and work with us.
That's wild.
Yeah, so that was
Where did you
really
post
cool.
it?
So it was like LinkedIn and Instagram.
Okay.
So it was kind of surfacing, and I know some like sports business venture clubs, or I actually spoke at the Arizona State Business School. So they sent it out to their peers and stuff like that. So it actually was all over the country, even people out of the country applying.
Wow.
So it was a crazy interview cycle for sure.
And you were just hiring like a handful?
Yeah, so we took about 6 out of the 580.
Wow.
So I joke around, I'm like basically running Harvard admissions this week. So but obviously those 6 people we took, it's about their second week now, so we're excited. Big things in store for them.
Sure. And so with that first opportunity that you got, you felt like, man, like this could be the entry to getting, because it's, very similar to our business. You serve somebody well, they tend to tell people about it, right? So did you view it more as like if I can get, if I can represent and serve this guy well, like he's going to tell his friends?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it was more so like with, the first one with Daniel was more so authentic just because we were friends before that, So I really wanted to, it was just that naturalness inside me where I wanted to put him in the best position to succeed. So just had that, dying will to produce for him, and also like, which I feel like is the best thing is like, when you're kind of in that limbo stage where you're kind of like scared not to make it, it's either, down or up. And, I don't know if there was a rebound after that, if Daniel didn't stick it out with me and, he cut ties, then, I'm pitching people off, I worked with this guy and he fired me, so it wasn't really, so that's where I was blessed where all my guys beginning and even now, I'm saying throughout the process where they all speak highly and, all that stuff, which I think is, essential to get into where.
And that's what's tough. Like, I remember when I was first getting into financial advising was like, I had, a few advisors that were like, I don't want to do business with my family or friends. Because it's like, it's a personal thing when it comes to money, if it's involved with money, right? And so in the beginning, I really steered clear away from that. But then it's actually a very rewarding experience from my own personal experience, like helping your friends.
Exactly.
Because it's like, that's what you're doing is you're helping, athletes in your particular field. And it's no different to what I do. So like I initially was a bit cautious on taking on friends or family members as clients, but it's actually much more rewarding when it comes to, on the other side of it. Now, outside of referrals, how are you getting guys right now? Just kind of curious because like I've connected with several different NIL, what do we call them? Want to call them agencies, right? Like I don't know if that's even the proper term, but I heard a unique one where they're sitting outside the gates at U of A, and that's how they got like one of their first clients was like kind of the elevator pitch, which was like super cool to hear because it's like we're in such a digital age and you just don't hear of like that mentality. But like, how are you guys getting guys at this point beyond referrals, or is it pretty much referrals still at this point?
No, yeah. So I mean, it's everything. We have people reach out on our website or our Instagram, but really where a lot of our signings come is the referrals, just because we work with good people. They know this family or stuff like that. We really like to do that because, we don't really represent random people, even if they're a top athlete. We we represent people that are highly referred, come from good, good family, all that stuff. Or, wanting to, go on this journey where, we could, help them go in a certain direction, but they are the ones lifting the weights. They're the ones, putting in the work. So, really just someone that matches that energy and, good morals and stuff like that. So we kind of, pick through that off the referral base, but really, our highly clouded, clients were like, Noah Sheffield or Damon Williams, top in their space. A lot of people follow them, whether, from back in the day or, now. So a lot of people kind of reach out, based off kind of what we're doing now as well.
Sure. Now, in terms of the NIL landscape where it currently is to where it started, what's been like the biggest difference that you've seen on your side of things?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was, it's brand new, right? So it's been kind of those first few years was they're working out the kinks, so to say, or really trying to narrow.
Were
it
they
down.
working out?
Yeah, so it's the Wild West is the perfect term. It's like everything brand new. There's gonna be little speed bumps and stuff like that.
Yeah, to say the least.
But I think like from what it was started to, if you look at the Johnny Manziel documentary with those number 2 jerseys flying off the shelf, it's like he's like, "Where's my money?" It's like rightfully so, So I think it's great the way it became because they're making X amount of money. These kids deserve to be compensated off what they're pulling in as well, So I think throughout that process, throughout the years, it's been great, where the big money's coming in and these guys are getting compensated. But I feel like now it's more so NFL free agency where everything's just kind of all over the place and guys are moving, left and right. And end of the day, they're still attending these schools, but they still do what's best for them and their, their current family and future family. So
yeah. So, and it's hard to fault the athlete to not do that. Like I'm trying to put myself in their shoes, right? And depending on where you are, maybe what NIL deals you're getting at your current school, your skill level, all those different factors, like the mid-majors are just in a very tough spot, right? I'm an Indiana State guy, so like that's kind of the spot they're in where like, hey, if I have a good year, I'll go test the market. Like, and if I'm getting XYZ here at a mid-major level, and my skills are comparable somewhere else, that's where I can, and I'm going to get compensated more. Like, why wouldn't you? That's what's tricky about this current landscape is to see, what the next 3 years look like. I don't really know. Like you said, it's still so new, but those mid majors. I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, but Indiana State had a great basketball team last year, and they lost basically their entire roster through the transfer portal. Like it's just,
and that's the bad part too, is where these guys are used to playing so much, where they might jump ship early, their freshman year somewhere, good where they'll grow into that role and make the NFL or all that stuff, but they're just not used to not being the guy there or not getting playing time, so they'll jump ship to another school, and at the end of the day you still have to develop and all that stuff, and there's still a culture to these programs,
sure.
So it's kind of just like finding the happy medium, where there's been guys that left money on the table because they believe in the culture, they believe the school, and I respect that,
Yeah.
And there's some guys that vice versa, and I respect that too, and that's kind of where like I like empowering the client, where you steer the ship, it's your life, you've earned this, but I'm gonna give my 2 cents, my suggestions, but you're calling the shots, obviously.
Sure.
So
let's say I'm an athlete, goes to ASU, I'm on the football team, I'm making a decent chunk of change. Like, why do I need an NIL agent?
Yeah, so I really say, what I tell the guys is like, you giving your all to, be in the spot you are to focus on football and grades right now. There's so much going on and that's a lot. School and football alone is a packed schedule.
100%.
So I also feel you should maximize off, the off-field benefits and stuff, but you shouldn't be DMing businesses or taking meetings or taking phone calls where you can have someone, do that off the field. So how I see it is, football is not a one-position game, right? You play your part on the field. It's like get a team off the field to play the part, and produce and maximize opportunities and stuff like that. So, because, tomorrow's not promised in this landscape either, so.
No question, especially in football. I mean, you never know, right? I mean, such a high-risk sport compared to most sports. So in terms of, okay, I'm working with you, like, what does that look like? Okay, I got an NIL agent. That's really neat. But, like, how can that help me in my future? Are we talking monetarily? Are we talking about, what does that entail, I guess? Because I'm already getting paid well as a, maybe I say I'm a defensive lineman. I'm getting paid well. Like, why do I need a do more than what I'm doing now?
Yeah. So
Or why should I
Yeah.
guess?
So sometimes it's not just the marketing, right? That we're a full tier agency, so we have the lawyers, we have the financial advisors and stuff like that. If you wanted, so a lot of these guys LLCs is a very smart move for them. So even just encouraging them to get that kind of stuff, get good habits in place, and then how I see the NIL landscape too, which is great, where you can almost work with them before the NFL, and it's like a test trial run where I'd tell them it's non-exclusive. They could fire us at any point. If you're not happy here, like you can cut bait, but I want to prove it to you that this is a great team to carry you into
Sure.
the NFL. So you're not taking 20 phone calls with random people. You're like, okay, this team has worked for me for 1, 2, 3 years. Now it's NFL time. They have a great NFL team on staff too. Former top 10 NFL picks, NFLPA, lawyers with 30-year NFL experience. And kind of have been working with them. So what it may look like too is even throughout NIL where they get on a monthly call with Kyle Brady, former 9th overall pick on our team, where he just shoots X's and O's. We might have a sit down with their family, have any questions they have on Zoom. Really, just everyone's different. Everyone likes some guys I'll call, some guys like texting updates. Really whatever fits their schedule best. I like to fit because everyone's different. So. Whatever works best for them, whatever they're looking for, we try to just maximize and be there for them.
Okay. So it's more like a full service than it is go get me a couple brand deals, it sounds
100%.
like.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to, because that's one of the perks of NIL is being able, like you said, profiting off your own image and likeness as well as your name. Your boots on the ground here, right? So you have local presence in the Valley, Phoenix area. So, but outside of that, because I know you have clients not just in Arizona, you have them everywhere. So in terms of like the NIL deal landscape, like how does that look like here locally and then on a broader scale, for your clients that are not in the state here?
Yeah, so it's nice my partner's out in Miami, so we get to operate on different time zones, and it's easier for him to go to Pennsylvania and easier for me to go to Washington, so he might hit Penn State that weekend, I'll hit Washington, kind of like divide and conquer kind of thing. And then we also have kind of NIL agents state specified. So it's whether that's our Colorado agent or our basketball head of operations is in a different state. And then we have a few interns that attend Penn State, so a little boots in the grounds over there if anything pops up. So really just kind of like spreading our network out to attack all these different areas. But as a lot of stuff can get tackled on Zoom and the phone calls these days too. So
no question. So in terms of some of the NIL deals that you've been able to, like say partner with brands, is that more times than not, local to the area, or is that sometimes a national thing as well? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so it's mostly locally, because that's just, the boosters and the fan base and the community is really bought into that school and those players. So just, the marketing synergy matches up more on that side. Unless you kind of get that, national level guy, that's going crazy, so to say, then the whole door opens, to national connections, stuff like that. And then, the NFL side of things, and the national connections too are, a lot of like free product deals too, where like we like to do where we're not necessarily making money, but our guys are happy, whether it's like local IV treatments, we do for the ASU guys where they get, they go to the hotel before the game and get them, IV, and maybe it's a local, Lolo's Chicken and Waffles, and our guys like that, so they get to go there, eat once a week for free, so stuff like that, really just like kind of play into their everyday stuff, and then, on national stuff, we work with like Armani and Spray Ground where they'll ship the guys kind of like gift bags and stuff like that, so, really just kind of, like I was saying, maximize and just, get them as much, stuff, if they use these stuff too, it's even, better, so, we actually just did something with Aloe too, so they're sending a lot of our NFL guys care packages, so stuff like that.
So does that vary? So the brand deals, does that vary from sport to sport, do you see? Or is that doesn't really matter? And where do you see like the companies that are doing it the best? Like what kind of deals, not necessarily from a how much, but like what are they doing? Is it like, hey, post socially, or is it, hey, can you talk about our product? Like what companies, or I shouldn't say what companies, but the companies that you've seen that are doing it the best, like what are they asking these athletes to do?
Yeah,
because part of the NIL landscape is like, it's not just, hey, right? There's got to be a transaction being taken, even though you don't have to have the written transaction, which hopefully that changes or it's about to change. But there's got to be some sort of
Deliverable,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so a lot of it's like social media campaigns, so it'll be a collaboration and then, maybe X amount of story posts, kind of organic, like you were saying, testimonials, stuff like that. We've done like autograph appearances, so like kind of in-person stuff where they might sell tickets to get that autograph and they show up to the sports card show. Stuff like that. I think like the best stuff is when they really, go big at it, where you see these private jet deals and stuff like that, where everyone's getting the Bleacher Report notification. Now you have that kind of, everyone's like, whoa, they did this deal. Those are kind of like the eye-opening deals I feel like are the best bang for your buck because, it's like national news, so to say.
Yeah.
And then, like I was saying, just tying with the community, like, I tell people all the time, like, even maybe it's not the direct, followers that they have is getting the deal, but, the community being like, oh, wow, they support ASU football, like, I'm going to, go stop by here, they're a part of the community, stuff like that. So
Sure.
I've seen those both avenues really work well for brands.
So these brands, are they ever bringing up like, hey, we really like this athlete, especially because they have X amount of followers? Is that a part of the conversation in terms of when they're structuring these deals? Or is that completely irrelevant to the conversation?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of people kind of, even value it, say 3 cents per follower. That's how like
Wow.
they'll run it, or it's 100% based off that really, especially when it comes to the social media, campaigns, because it's hard to weigh it too, and kind of to touch on what you were saying before is what, when do you kind of see these happening is really like what's hot, where ASU was on that run this past season, like everyone was trying to work with them, where now it might be a little more tailored towards basketball schools, so you might get that, guy to go make a name for himself.
Right, last year was crazy.
Yeah, DJ, yeah, so you see that, so it's like, how I see it too, I've been talking, it's a gamble, right? Like it's as any investment is, you partner with these guys, you don't know your exact ROI, so really, how big of the risk you want to take, and I've seen, some businesses not be in the position to take that risk, and then, they come back and the price is 10 times higher now, or the other business that kind of has the capital, they're like, whatever, let's do it. It works out great for them, where that guy goes on a great run that year,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, 3 cents per follower, depending on, the following, is pretty wild.
Yeah, all platforms too, so, I know they do like maybe like TikTok is 2 cents, maybe Instagram is like 4, different
Yeah.
platforms kind of weigh out different stuff. And a lot of these companies hire marketing, agencies to
Sure.
work for themselves, so they'll have their own way of doing it where they work with, a bunch of different brands, but that's kind of how they run things off,
Sure.
Cent per follower,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that.
So I'd have at least $7. Now, talk to me about, do you guys view yourselves more at Young Buck like football first, basketball second, or like, hey, we're catering to any all sports? So if I'm a track star here and I'm a future Olympian, right, is that a good fit with where you guys are, or are you specifically kind of narrowing in on the football?
Yeah, so football is obviously our main one, just because our resources and how we were built, like I was saying with Kyle Brady on our team and Mike and Mark, who represented, Marcus Colston, David Tyree. So we kind of have that like, football clout, so to say. Yeah. But, baseball with working with Noah Sheffield, one of the top baseball players in the country, it's not looking like we're going to go out and sign a ton more, right? Just because, we're happy working with him and we have the resources to provide for him and stuff like that, and we don't want to stretch it, It's where football, we have a ton of resources on that staff and where we kind of pile in, so to say, where there's multiple agents, multiple, lawyers all working, for, these guys. So it really, we've worked with, Track Star before, what I'm saying? It all depends, what I'm saying? If we think we can help you, what I'm saying, and we can provide a, help throughout the process, we'll gladly do it.
Yeah.
It's more so just we shoot a straight arrow, what I'm saying? I don't promise deals. I'm not like we're going to make you X or this, that. I'm like, we have this, and that here, and we think we could potentially get you this. If you think it's a good fit, let's try it out type of thing. Where football is really just a space we've dominated, and it's kind of don't fix it if it's not broken type of thing.
Totally makes sense. Well, and that's where the revenue is too.
Exactly.
I used to complain in college for sure because football and basketball got everything. But to be fair, those are the two sports that bring in the most revenue for the school. So
100%.
That's why they're investing into those sports. Even our own football team at Indiana State, who they they were struggling, to say the least, when I was there. In the beginning, they got better. But they would go on the road to Penn State, and Penn State would pay them, I think at the time it was like $200K or $250,000 to get the pants beat off of them, right? But like that is also helping fund not only just the football team, but all the other sports. But it's such a crazier landscape now. And I think you touched on a good topic with what you were just saying in terms of I never promise anything, because that's something that makes me nervous is these kids leaving schools with the hopes of or maybe being promised something. And because nothing's in writing as of yet, guys may leave a school with the promise of X, Y, and Z, and then it doesn't happen, but they don't really have an argument to be made. Have you seen a ton of that, or have you heard a lot of it? Or is that more just like things that you hear but aren't actually happening?
Yeah, so what I've seen a lot is like, they're running a business themselves, right? So let's say this organization has X amount of money to give out to players. No matter who you are, whether you're your star quarterback, they're going to want you to get the cheapest option possible because they could, fix other problems they have. So I've seen a lot, even with the high school kids where they kind of be like, oh, this is, for example, like, oh, this is how we do things at Ohio State. You got to come earn your stripes, where they're really just, they're running a business. They would give you that money, if you lawyered up and you had, 30-year NFL, how we do it, our 30-year NFL agents and lawyers go in and handle that negotiation, which everyone really likes. It's much cleaner that way too, and to make sure, that stuff is written and they are guaranteed that stuff, So I've seen it, all the time where, just in life, I feel like people think the grass is greener on the other side. They think it's all, all great over there, but, you don't realize how, good your stuff is you have over here too. So I think that just, happens no matter what, and then when you start throwing around this amount of money in situations and playing time, it's bound to happen,
Yeah, and have you seen, what is it, On3? Is that the big website? Like how, when you see some of those numbers, like how accurate do you feel like some of those are? Like, are they fairly accurate, or are they blown out of your proportion? Like,
they're definitely blown out of proportion, and it's tough because it's like, are you talking about, people might think, oh, that's what they're getting in marketing deals, so they'll see a Waymo commercial and they're like, oh yeah, like is that part of that, check or whatever, where a lot of it's, the collective agreement where that's what they're getting paid to be at that school. But I mean, it's not crazy accurate, where, I mean, these kids are making crazy money, some of them, but it's kind of just like that thing, don't believe everything you read, where it can't be dead accurate, They could ballpark, they have reporters and stuff like that. I know a few great reporters there that when they, someone transfers and stuff like that, they're on it, that stuff, crazy accurate, but I feel like it's hard to pinpoint the exact dollar amount someone's, making for sure.
Now, since the time NIL has become a thing to where it is now, has the money continued to keep increasing, or has it been pretty stagnant?
For sure increasing, yeah. So up until, this year, every year is just increased. The transfer portal is the craziest stuff, where, like I was saying before, it's free agency basically in the NFL, where they used to kind of say, this is where you earn your stripes, college, but it's like, it's not what it is, because if you were in the NFL and the Seahawks were going to give you $7 million, but the Saints were going to give you 10, you would just do it, you know what I'm saying? So stuff like that, obviously you weigh a little different if it's situation stuff, but I think now like that it's grown to this level, it is more point blank where that money is a direct reflection on what they think of you, where if someone's going to give you $1 million to come play there this year, they're probably going to utilize you pretty well and have big stuff in store for you,
Facts, yeah. It's honestly, it reminds me a lot of the baseball draft, and was just talking right before this where the round where you get drafted and the amount that you sign for both play key roles in your future in terms of getting the opportunity. And it's very similar in a corporate setting where if somebody gave you a sign-on bonus to come work at Microsoft, I'm just using that as an example, and they put a larger investment into you, and you come over and you stink, they're still probably going to give you a little bit of a leash because they've made an upfront investment in you. And in the baseball world, just give you an example, getting drafted in the first round matters a lot. That can keep you around a very long time because you were good enough to be a first-round draft pick. So even if it doesn't work out with the organization that you're currently in, doesn't mean that if you get released, you probably have a pretty good chance because you have that pedigree of being a first-rounder. on the other side of it, the money matters. And so, it's almost equal parts in terms of, okay, hey, if we give player A 100,000, we give player B 2 million, which one are we going to give more of an opportunity, right? And so it's almost the same sort of deal in the NIL landscape from what it sounds like. It's like, hey, this is our commitment to you. This is what we're showing in you, and they're going to have more than likely that opportunity. So in terms of if I'm a player, interested in these schools, are those conversations that players are allowed to have in terms of, hey, this school in the Midwest gave me a pretty sizable offer, to where you can leverage it against the other school, or is that something that's not?
Yeah, so it's like periods, so it's like a transfer portal period where, you enter your kind of name in the hat, so to say, enter your name into the portal, and then they could reach out where, they have our name on that stuff, the portal too. So, people will reach out, ask us kind of, if the player decides to let us handle it, if they want us to be like, hey, you go handle, the negotiation, stuff like that, they could directly reach out to us. Yeah, it's quick moving though, so even those guys like that were playing in the playoff game, I think they had like 5 days really after to make a decision, and you have to realize there's a 19-year-old kid with, a girlfriend at this place, and it's like it's hard just to kind of, even with the money, what I'm saying, kind of just drop everything and, do that. But I think we have like great clients where like we sign guys that are like NFL mentality, where like their goal, they know like the money is in the NFL, even though there's crazy money in it now, where that's huge because I feel like, kids kind of cash out, so to say, early, where they're like, okay, yeah, let me go here for the money. But like if you're going to get that one paycheck, for sure, that's great. But if you stay here in a good situation, good role, good organization, now you might go be a 5th-round draft pick and play 13 years in the NFL. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So our guys are really good, like NFL first, they know what it is. So that's great. But I feel like, around the country, I'm sure there's a lot of like weighing where it's like, hey, I might not make it. We only sign guys that we believe are going to be in the NFL, so they obviously believe that too, where those guys that are kind of half and half, like I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, this might not be the best situation, but this is guaranteed money. Let me go jump on this and take it from there.
Yeah, shooting. And now I don't know if the law is going to go into effect in terms of JUCO players getting those 2 years not counting against their Division I years, but you're talking about a situation where you could potentially be in college if you're a 2-year JUCO kid, and that's just if you had 2 years there, but 2-year JUCO kid and then 4 years at D1, and that's not even saying you had a medical or a gray shirt. Like it's like for those that aren't pro ready, I mean, you could be a really good college player and make some good money right now and delay, the fact that you're going to end up going into a corporate world more than likely for some of those guys that aren't NFL eligible, like or NFL caliber, to where it's like, shoot, stay in college, man.
For
Get
sure.
3 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for free too, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So talk to me about, let's say I hit the portal. Like with some of your guys that have been in that instance, is it just like, what's that like? Is it bonkers? Like, is it for a guy that's, I know in football world, it's 5-star, player or whatever it is. And I don't even know if they carry that over from high school to where when they're in college, but say a decent player, like, are they just getting blown up? Is it like 20 schools? Is it 50? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, because like with a short timeline, you really can't, right? Where it's like you can't go visit 50 schools this week, So that's kind of talking with our guys where, where they have a few schools in mind or this that, and we should really try to narrow it down, and then really just kind of feel those offers from those top 3 maybe, and then go back and talk with them. But like you're saying, it's a stressful time for them, us, their family, where it's it all happens fast. Kind of the same thing we're going through with the NFL, this year where. It happens fast, and it's obviously their biggest test of their life, so it's stressful, So I get it, where their heads all over the place, rightfully so, along with everybody. I can't imagine the GMs or the guys that are running these collectives and stuff like that, like what their phone's looking like, because they gotta do all positions, all this stuff, and map out. Okay, we spent this, or if this kid hops on this, we're gonna spend that. So that's probably absolute mayhem. But yeah, it's stressful, It's stressful for the players. I mean, but it's part of it. It's the new world, in the NFL kind of, and it's kind of nice because I used to, hear it's like, oh, these kids are only 21 going to the NFL. They need this, and that. They need the same thing now at 18. So they're almost in this world of money and fame and having to do all the right stuff with the LLCs and this and that, where they have to grow up fast. So by the time they've been in this program doing this stuff, kind of they get used to it. They're very mature for their age. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Where they have, they're businessmen. They're making great money and they're calling the shots on their career, rightfully so, and it's all well deserving.
Now, does it, from your side of things, do you build relationships with coaches? I know obviously you have people under your umbrella that have 30 plus years of experience on the agency side of things, but in terms of, I know I'm going to have a player hit in the portal. So rather than waiting till he hits the portal, because it's going to be a hot mess in terms of the amount of people potentially, like, are you allowed, how does that process work in terms of, like, in your position, are you allowed to talk to other schools saying, hey, there's a chance that, one of our guys is going into the portal? Like, how is that a conversation you can have, or is there rules around it?
I mean, I think like they'll kind of just put it on our radar where, they'll say something or, put it on our radar where they're interested in a certain position or stuff like that, but we really don't talk specifics on the players. And a lot of times they're finishing up their season too, so I wouldn't even want to bother them if a school's trying to come in and kind of legally tamper early. It's like I wouldn't even want to have that conversation this early with them either way. But yeah, so really, it's kind of just it's the Wild West, where things are moving, left and right everywhere. But there's that period where they're supposed to reach out and talk to us and go from there.
What positions are paying the most, at least on the football side? I know on a basketball perspective, it's a big guy, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to find a 7-footer just on the street, right? But on the football side of things, and I think there's a website that does a pretty good job. I don't know if it's On3 or who it is, where they break down the position by position. Like, where are guys getting compensated the most? And is that, I know you said it's gone up and up every single year, but is it by position? Is it experience? Like, who's really reaping the benefits in this system right now? Yeah, so
it goes into all that stuff, right? But mostly position, where obviously the quarterbacks are getting paid great, which is the obvious. But really like left tackle, like the position to block that blind side for the quarterback, and the offensive line, they pay well, very well if you can go get someone to protect your biggest investment, right?
No question.
That should be your second biggest. Corner is like a very scarce position where no one has enough good corners, where every coach I've talked to is, hey, if you have any corners, let me know. Just a depth position, like it's hard to come by, especially in college. It's hard to come by in the NFL, it's especially hard to come by in college. Linebacker is a great position, kind of D-tackle too. Really, end of the day, if you can, get someone to really shift your team dynamic where those kind of positions can, where, left tackle can really revamp your offensive line, or a big presence on the D-line, where a lockdown corner to go take away someone's wide receiver one. That's where the kind of big money is, because they're really solving problems. They know the guys are going to go up against, this wide receiver a few times, or they know where they struggled this past season, and they have the boosters in their ear and the fan base and stuff like that. So they're the ones that kind of have to go answer those problems, So, usually it's those positions.
That's what's crazy in football is like, baseball you can get away with being, maybe undersized, but when you're going up against a 300-pound guy that can run a 4.6 60, or it's not 60, a 40, and he's lining up against the guy that's 250, and it's like you can just overpower people,
100%,
right?
yeah.
And it's like in this landscape, in some manner, right? Because like you said, just because you're getting paid more doesn't mean it's a better situation for you. But it's like you can almost be as good as you can be from the NIL side. And I know after I retired from playing baseball, I went into coaching, and I coached at a JUCO in Iowa. And, we were limited with the amount of funds that we could give scholarship-wise, right? We had X amount over, here's your budget, and it's kind of like a salary cap. Mm-hmm. But it was based on the school and what they could provide. But it's like we could fundraise, to, bridge the gap. So it's like, man, I remember being there and being like, man, we can be as good as we can as good as we fundraise, essentially, right? Like, obviously, we're not going to, get the high-profile guy based on where our program was at the time, but I always felt like, man, if we can fundraise the what out of it, like, we can compete with these other guys. And in this landscape, I mean, kind of ASU is kind of a prime example of, historically speaking, it's not like they're going to the, college football playoffs but like considering the year they had last year, but it's the amount of alumni, when you have success and momentum on your side, you can really start to put forth some good teams and dish some. I mean, how many students go to ASU now? It's
exactly, like 60,000.
Right, and so you talk about 60,000, right, and not 60,000 per class, but it's like that's a lot of people, and if there's success in the program, they might be more apt to, donate to the program. And what's interesting from an alumni standpoint, it's like, sure, I can donate to the booster, and I can deduct that amount, and you don't get that benefit, when you're going the NIL route, but you feel like you have a little bit more control on where your funds are going, as opposed to the booster, where it's kind of like it's going there and it's going to the general health of the institution, where it's like maybe I'm a football alum at ASU and I'm like a successful entrepreneur and I want to be able to, really help out the program, where I can feel like that money's actually being used towards something greater, versus, kind of the booster setup now. Another question I have, kind of going off of the pay, because it's like we talk about this is, the quarterback's getting paid the most. For somebody that's tuning into this and they've just heard that, oh, these players are getting paid so much, this, that, the other. It's not always the case. But for somebody that is attending, a school at like ASU or maybe a UW, and I'm a left tackle, right? You said, like, without giving obviously specific details, but like, is that person making $80K? Is that person making 20? Like, what are we talking about here? Because we hear all these crazy numbers. Like, what's actually legit from what you've seen, and what can one expect if they were a left tackle being in a like a Power 5 conference, roughly?
Oh yeah, I mean, it obviously, goes, from top to bottom, where it depends the role you're going to play too, where, they might bring you on, $4K a month if you're a freshman, you know what I'm saying? And then you go blow it up. Now they know, if you go here, they're going to give that, so, I mean, hundreds of thousands, it's guys are getting paid, I would probably say average number maybe for like the Big Ten, maybe like $400K for that position, you know what I'm saying? Top half kind of like carries the bottom, you know what I'm saying? But no, I mean, it's crazy money, and it's well deserved too, where they do, they have deliverables where they'll every month they got to do stuff for the collective, whether it's companies they're partnered with or stuff like that, or Feed My Starving Children show up there, like stuff like that. So and that's what it was always meant to be, you know what I'm saying? Was to do both and not just be play for play, So I think ASU does a great job with that, especially like you were talking about before, like kind of the snowball effect, where it's so hard to get that money and be competitive if you're not there. And like that's why I think Kenny Dillingham's the greatest coach in the last 5 years in all college football, where he turned that 3-9 squad around and like activated the Valley and had everyone bought in and got the money and really checked every box, where you're happy if you check one of those boxes in a few years and you kind of just keep plugging away, chipping, but he really turned that around within this year. So
he seems I don't know what the term would be, feisty, or he's got the dog in him for sure.
For sure.
And it's the tricky part too in this world is a guy like him, he has another one or 2 years like that, like another school might be calling, right?
Oh, they paid him good though. They locked him up this year, so he'll be here. And he's actually a Sun Devil for life, where he
no doubt
he always wanted to do it here. His family's here and stuff like that. Kind of just reminds me of myself too, where it's like I love it. I love it here. I tell them all the time, I want my guys to stay here. I'm right here in Scottsdale. I'm an ASU alumni. There's no place I'd rather, see a team succeed, stuff like that. Where especially now after this year, he's here to stay. Where maybe if he, it was a hard time for a few years and he had to, go figure out a job somewhere else, but he's earned it here. I feel like he earned the keys to the castle over here for quite a bit.
Well, and I saw he was on a podcast recently where he was talking about when he first started coaching, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was here or if it was somewhere else, where he basically got like demoted to where, he was expected to get this role and then he didn't. And he was like, he took it more of as an opportunity than to feel sorry for himself. And the premise of the story was like, yeah, if I was asked to go get towels, I was going to be the best towel guy.
Yeah,
like,
I think I did see that.
Yeah, and it's man, I can respect a guy that has that mentality because it's like so many people wouldn't have that mentality if they were expected to get that one job or that one opportunity, and then they feel sorry for themselves and never even end up, doing anything with that. So it's a pretty good leader to have, in your locker room, and a pretty cool story for those players. Somebody that's, at least walked the walk and talked the talk in terms of getting to where he did, which is hard work and dedication and grinding.
No, exactly. And the biggest thing is having the locker room bought in, where, I represent a ton of ASU guys, and they all have nothing but great things to say about him. No matter when it was, always bought into Kenny, bought into the culture, bought into the program, where that's the biggest thing, because if you lose the locker room where they're like questioning you or, oh, is this guy know what he's talking about? Now you're on an uphill battle, where he always ran a tight ship where they believed in him, and followed and, executed. So. Yeah,
and that's I think the tricky part about being a coach is like you have to have tough conversations. So like you don't want to be like buddy with your players. Like you got to be able to have, that middle ground where you're not like arm's length and they can't even relate to you or associate with you, but you can't also be the best friend, because sometimes you got to tell the, athletes that you're not going to be here next year, or that somebody took your job. And those are tougher conversations to have if you built like this relationship that's like too close. So there's like this fine balance. And I had the opportunity to play with or to play for Pete Rose Jr. So Pete Rose's son. I was actually out golfing yesterday with a guy that we both played for him. And like the ultimate like player's manager, like he had your back.
Yeah.
And there is something about that. It's hard to like really explain, but it's like you'd run through a wall for the guy.
Yeah, contagious
right?
Energy really flowing throughout. Yeah,
100%. And we had shot him a message after we got done with the round and just exchanging messages, and there were some funny conversations to be had. But it's like I always felt like he had my back, and vice versa. So it's like you can really, when you have that buy-in, and that's the hardest part, is getting everybody to buy in, especially in football too, because you got to have a certain amount of players to like practice. Mm-hmm. Like,
it's a big chemistry. Yeah, it's a big squad for sure.
And you're competing, and so like there's going to be guys that are competitive that aren't a starter, and to continue to get those guys to buy in is a difficult thing to do. It's not easy, and it's been pretty impressive to see. Now, another question I had was talking in terms of where do you see this going from here? Like, I know it's the Wild West now, but like, where do you see things that are inefficient proving to be more efficient, or what would you like to see in the NIL landscape, and where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, so I mean, they're obviously going to dive into revenue sharing here, so it's a little more controlled following this year. But
explain that briefly for people that again wouldn't know what revenue sharing is if they're just tuning in.
Yeah, so basically it's more so of a controlled cap, where these organizations will have a certain amount of money. It's more so just organized with the payout, where right now it's as much as money you can get, you can spend really, So kind of just like it's like the paired with a TV rights deal, So they'll have the TV rights deal, and they'll get compensated for appearing on that game and stuff like that, and get hashed out for that year and stuff. But I really don't see it pulling back, because once you kind of go in this direction where these guys are making this money and accomplishing these stuff off the field, partnerships, all this stuff, I don't see you being able to pull that back, so to say, So I think really just kind of tweaking it. I think it's a great industry, obviously, and everything's flowing well. Just, tweaks along the way, which any industry, just with more time and more knowledge, just kind of making it effective along the way.
What do you like? Give me one example of a tweak, like something that, you feel like comes up over and over. Like for me, in your world, like if the transfer thing wasn't like if that was eliminated, where you just had the ability not to transfer, like you had to sit out a year. I know that's not the world we live in, but like I feel like that would shore up a lot of the craziness.
Yeah.
Like if you couldn't transfer and go play right away, like you may not transfer.
Yeah.
I understand that's not the reality of the situation, but it's like, that to me would solve a lot of the issues. I know that's not ever going to maybe not be a thing, but like that to me is always like the biggest, coming from a major school, it's like, man, it's tough. Like, because, if a guy, like another prime example and how NIL, in my opinion, has negatively impacted sports is in the baseball world, typically you go out and play in the summer. And that to me is like probably the sole reason why I even got a chance. I wasn't even like that great of an athlete. I was thankful for just a chance at professional baseball. But it was because every summer I went and played. In the landscape that we're currently in, like if I'm a head coach at a mid-major Division I school, why would I send my best pitcher out? I'm not saying I was the best pitcher, but just like the best pitcher on my team. Why would I send him out to go play in a league when there's an opportunity that he's going to be playing with guys that are like SEC, ACC type players? And this player could be that pedigree to where he talks to his teammates and, you know what, shoot, that guy's getting $150K over here. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, dude, like you're where? You could probably just let me talk to my pitching guy.
Yeah.
So then what you're starting to see is coaches are no longer sending players out. And so what they do now is they send them to like facilities back home and they throw inside and they train, which isn't a bad thing, but it's definitely not a good thing because like you need game experience, you need innings, you need to pitch in front of fans, you need the pressure of the game, all those elements. And you can't, it's so hard. It's almost impossible to recreate inside or outdoors, even if you were doing a simulated training. And now you're just not seeing it. So like all these summer league teams like are so diluted because it's a business and the quality of play is down and then you're not having coaches send any players out. So like that to me, I'm like, man, if the transfer rule was still in place, it would shore up a lot. But like what would be like one specific thing that you feel like could get cleaned up that would help in the NIL world?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind like, maybe like a limit to like one transfer, you know what I'm saying, per like 2 years or something. Just because I see, the situations unfold, you're going to go, for, personnel situation or whatever, but you do lose credits along that way, you know what I'm saying? So then, luckily it hasn't really happened with us, but it's like then you get to the time where they're going to the league and it's, oh, you don't have the degree yet, just go and then, go back and get it where, you get $20 million or you're going to go back and get your degree, which I think is important too, get that degree. So I wouldn't mind that. And I just feel like I'm like a big person, like everything happens for a reason too. So, there's a reason you chose that school, like don't cut bait because you had a bad practice or, things aren't going great that first year, freshman year. Like you set out in high school down to go here for 4 years, so I would like them to see it kind of give it more of a shot, but I think it's great because it creates the flexibility for the players, to change situations, but it's also a lot on the coaches. Like that's why Saban gave it up. Like he's not going to fly to families' houses every month for all, it's nonstop recruiting now, because the transfer portal, you get the spring, the fall, whatever. He's not going to do that anymore, where even like some schools that aren't, heavily involved in the transfer portal, like they're just going to get burned, you know what I'm saying, where this is the game that's being played, whether that's your culture or not, it's going to probably hurt you if you don't get involved, so.
Well, and it gets really, like you gave the example of the guy that makes $20 million. Is he going to finish a degree? Probably not. But, yeah, that's what's difficult, too, in this landscape is, like, if you're a kid in high school, like, especially on the baseball side of things, you get drafted, if you end up signing, you better feel pretty good about, that team, that organization, where it's headed and where your career is because, I played with a handful of guys that probably should have gone to college, and they didn't, and they signed for, let's call it like 100,000, and then after 4 years, 5 years, and they didn't make it. So now they're 23 years old and have zero education, and they're like going back to school, but most of them don't end up going back to school because it's like, okay, then I'm going to go to 4 years of school, and then I'm going to be, like most of them don't even end up going back. Now, I do think we do live in a world where the 4-year degree, it's still valuable, right? But it's maybe not as much as valuable as it once was, which I think is honestly a positive thing, because the whole idea of just racking up a ton of debt and then
100%,
then spending the first 10 years trying to pay off that debt is crazy to me. But like,
I mean, I even came out here, I was more so, I saw college as more so the experience to build a network than, obviously get a great education, stuff like that. But I always see like college as like half and half, really, where you get the degree, but you get to go kind of build a network in this area and make something out of it, and try to, parlay into something. But, like you said, it's tough to like, pitch, America, basically. Everyone going to debt at 18, it's a rough, uphill battle after that, so.
Well, and you just do it because it's the cost of education is one thing, and then it's like, oh, well, how else do I fund my school? And yeah, the biggest wealth builder you have is your income. So like, if you're throwing $500 a month at your debt, that's $500 less dollars that could be used towards X, Y, and Z. So just a couple last questions here, talking specifically about, Young Buck. Where do you see the future of your company going? Like, it's, you guys are in a very niche, like you where you're successful and you're staying in your lane. I love that. Too many people, right? I think you said it. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? It's like, would you rather be average at 5 things or be really good at 1 to 2? And I think that you guys have done a really good job of that. But where do you see Young Buck, here in the future?
Yeah, so I see us being a top, full-tier agency, within the next 10 years. Next year alone, we have, some top 100 picks, with, guys. So we have a big class next year. We have about 9 guys, trying to make rosters this year and squeeze into that back end of the draft and stuff. So, really just, keep chipping away, but really just put our best foot forward. That's how we've always done it, like built our team where, kind of like how you were saying before, where when we're talking about Kenny, where, it's kind of like that hard middle ground where, you're young and, you got to be professional, but also, they're a friend and stuff. And that's kind of like where I was at too, where, I want to have that relationship with them because they feel open with me because, I'm young and stuff like that. And that's kind of where the boots on the ground terms come, where me and my partner, they feel open to us, where they might tense up with, a 50-year-old guy in a suit. With us, it's like, hey, what's going on? What are you thinking? And then we have the whole team where, I'm not going over the contract. That's for the lawyers. I'm not investing the money, So really just all stay in our own lane, which I think has always been, got us to where we are and is going to, take us to the moon, where there's no ego on our team. There's no one like, trying to, get all the credit or stuff like that. It's, we really just genuinely want what's best for the athlete. I really see these guys as like future uncles to my kid. I really see it like family, where I would take care of, their kids like they're my own, what I'm saying? So I really see us, as, going through just putting our best foot forward. And obviously, stuff goes left, stuff goes right. You never know. But, just kind of just keep chipping away and eventually get to the top of all that stuff. But, with that, it really isn't kind of, a money or success thing. It's really just, I feel like that gives us more of a platform to do, what's right. What I'm saying? Where these guys are, in such a scary landscape where we want to protect them. So, being one of those biggest agencies, out there will, let me help more people. That's how I see it,
Yeah, no doubt. And you guys have done, considering, that we're only 3 or 4 years into this thing, you guys have done a really good job in your space. And if you see the amount of players that you guys are now representing, if that's the term that you guys use in your world, but, it's not just ASU. There's quite a bit of guys from a lot of different states, so it's pretty cool to see. Now, for those that are tuning in that kind of want to keep track of where you guys are headed and where you guys are going, like where can people follow you, Can they find you on social media? Like, where can people look you
Yep,
up?
yeah. So I go Young Buck on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can check out our website as well. Me, my partner's personal page. My partner Ben Clouser, my personal page Ray Erario. We're always, we eat, breathe, and sleep Young Buck. We don't have a wife or kids or anything. We're every hour of the day is Young Buck. So we're always, it's our baby really. So we're always posting stuff like that. So all social stuff and website stuff like that.
Sweet. Now, last question I have. You turned 30. Is Young Buck going to turn into Old Buck, or is that because obviously, look, you guys are Young Bucks, so like the name fits. But as you guys get older into your 30s, would it ever change? You think?
No, I don't think so. And I think we always have kind of those young hustlers involved. Where like I was always a person I always want to learn Northwest, East, and South. Whether they're 10 years younger than me, like even right now, I'm 23. If I could learn stuff from my 15-year-old cousin, so I always think there's a value to have those young bucks, in the scene and kind of getting their insight and stuff like that. It was actually funny you say that because I had one of my clients going to the NFL. He's like, told us this week, he's like, I'm gonna turn Young Buck to Big Bucks this year. So I was like, let's go, man.
I like it. That could be a new maybe a slogan for you guys.
Right?
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, hey, Ray, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm really looking forward to getting this out, and really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thanks a lot.
Any opinions are those of Jason Van Skyke, financial advisor, and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Any information is not a complete summary or statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision and does not constitute a recommendation. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. This information is not intended as a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security referred to herein. Investments mentioned may not be suitable for all investors. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. International Headquarters: the Raymond James Financial Center, 880, Carillon Parkway, St. Petersburg, FL 337, 16-800-0248-863, RaymondJames.com, copyright 2024. Raymond James and Associates Inc. member, New York Stock Exchange, SIPC, copyright 2023. Raymond James Financial Services Inc. member, FINRA/SIPC. Raymond James is a registered trademark of Raymond James Financial Inc. Investment products are not deposits, not FDIC, NCUA insured, not insured by any government agency, not bank guaranteed, subject to risk and may lose value.